Yakuza Zero. If you are looking to get into the Yakuza series, Zero is probably the best place because it is chronologically and has you on the edge of your seat all the time wondering what will happen next. The side content of minigames and sub-stories is hilariously entertaining and helps to break up the story's serious side for a change of pace. The brawler combat also feels impactful and strategic as you change your combat stance in order to suit the situation at hand to defeat waves of street thugs and Yakuza mobs alike. The game is almost always on sale at an affordable price, so it is an easy recommend for players looking to dive into a series full of wacky characters, weird NPC encounters, and underworld criminal affairs. The game jumps back and forth depending on the story chapters between playing two characters, Kazuma Kiryu and Goro Majima. When you are in control of a character in the city worlds of Kamurocho or Sotenbori, you are usually free to either head towards a pink marker on the map indicating main story progress, or to wander around the city and do random side activities ranging from random NPC substories to playing minigames like karaoke or dancing in the disco. Proceeding with main story quests usually leads to long voice-acted cutscenes where the story unfolds and has you usually entering combat to deal with a plethora of grunts, thugs, and Yakuza officials. The story has you play as Kiryu or Majima, and you don't switch between the characters at will, at least until you complete the main story. Both of their arcs are important to the overall plot though, and each of them have completely different battle styles and distinct combat maneuvers. Side content rewards you with comical questlines, weird NPCs, fun minigames, and more often than not good money-making methods. You can run into a kid who wants you to buy a dirty magazine for him, a Michael Jackson look-alike who wants you to help him with his next music video, and a guy who can't cross a bridge without getting beat up because of a jacket he refuses to take off. You can take a break and visit a Sega arcade to play some old school games, go to a karaoke and sing some great songs, go bowling, go fishing, and more. At certain points, you unlock character-specific businesses that you can run, and let's just say Majima's Cabaret Club business is the best minigame mini-storyline just in fun factor. Yakuza Zero is a great starting point for someone new to the series, is usually low in price, contains an amazing captivating story, and is full of entertaining side activities. I would highly recommend anyone to play this game, and the other Yakuza games in general. Mafia Definitive Edition. If you're looking for a story-driven game that captures the golden era of organized crime, Mafia Definitive Edition is absolutely worth your time. This isn't just a remaster, it's a complete overhaul of the original Mafia, bringing 1930s Lost Heaven to life with stunning visuals, improved gameplay mechanics, and a captivating story that feels as fresh as ever. You play as Tommy Angelo, a cab driver who stumbles into the dangerous world of the mob. What follows is a journey full of loyalty, betrayal, and the kind of cinematic storytelling that few games can pull off as well as this one.
I guess I heard nothing.
You gonna know these punks when you see them?
Mafia has always been about atmosphere, and the Definitive Edition nails that perfectly. The city feels alive, like you're stepping back in time to a world where mobsters ruled the streets. Every corner has that 1930s vibe, from the vintage cars to the authentic music, and it really sets the tone for what's about to unfold. The developers clearly poured a lot of love into recreating this world, making it both familiar for fans of the original and exciting for newcomers. The gameplay itself is straightforward but satisfying, with some modern updates that make it more accessible without losing that classic Mafia feel. And let's talk about the story. It's intense, emotional, and pulls you right in. The characters, especially Tommy, feel well-rounded, and their struggles feel real. You'll get sucked into this underworld, making choices and dealing with the consequences that hit hard. For those who missed the original or are looking for a refined experience, Mafia Definitive Edition is worth every penny. It's a love letter to fans of crime dramas, and trust me, you won't regret adding this one to your collection.
Yeah, boss.
Sam says you worked out an angle.
Yeah, and you're gonna...
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. If there's one game that has fans of the RPG genre buzzing, it's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. As the second entry in the ambitious remake trilogy, Rebirth takes the beloved characters and world of the original Final Fantasy VII and dials everything up. This isn't just a rehash of the classic story, it's a bold reimagining that manages to surprise even the most die-hard fans while still capturing the essence of what made the original so legendary. The world in Rebirth feels expansive and alive. Stepping outside of Midgar, you'll find yourself immersed in breathtaking environments that make the journey feel epic. The visual detail is stunning, and the game's vibrant world draws you in from the moment you take your first steps. Every scene is dripping with nostalgia, but the new twists and turns in the story will keep you guessing, even if you think you know how it all plays out. Combat in Rebirth builds on the system from the first remake, blending real-time action with tactical elements that let you pause and strategize. It's fast-paced, but it also allows for moments of reflection to plan your next move, giving battles a cinematic flair. And of course, watching characters like Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith in action never gets old. There's something incredibly satisfying about seeing these iconic heroes rendered in modern graphics doing what they do best. But it's not just about the combat and visuals. Rebirth carries a deep emotional weight. The relationships between the characters are fleshed out even more, and the game doesn't shy away from the darker, more complex themes of the original. It's a game that knows its roots but isn't afraid to branch out and offer something new. Whether you're a longtime fan or someone new to the series, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a must-buy. It's a rare combination of nostalgia and innovation that makes for an unforgettable experience. You won't regret diving into this epic continuation of one of gaming's greatest stories.
Excuse me. Guess the travel or...
Control. If you're into games that mess with your head and make you question what's real, Control is an absolute must-play. This game throws you into the heart of the Federal Bureau of Control, a secretive government agency that deals with the weird, the supernatural, and the downright mind-bending. You play as Jessie Faden, who's searching for answers about her missing brother but quickly realizes she's in way over her head. From the second you step into the Bureau, you know you're in for something different. The atmosphere is unsettling in the best way possible, like the walls are hiding secrets they don't want you to find. And the game wants you to feel lost and confused at times, just like Jessie, but that's part of the thrill. Every room has a strange, otherworldly vibe, and the constantly shifting environment keeps you on edge. Gameplay is insanely fun. Jessie's telekinetic abilities let you hurl objects at enemies, fly through the air, and just wreck everything in sight. The combat feels fluid and empowering, but it's also chaotic in a way that keeps you on your toes. And as you unlock more powers, the game just gets crazier. You're not just fighting enemies, you're battling an environment that's as unpredictable as the creatures you face. What's wild about Control is that it doesn't spoon-feed you the story. You'll be piecing together documents, listening to creepy recordings, and exploring weird corners of the Bureau to figure out what's going on. It's mysterious, it's cryptic, and it feels like you're in the middle of a sci-fi horror thriller. If you're tired of the usual action games and want something that'll blow your mind and keep you guessing, Control is worth every penny. It's one of those rare games where the experience sticks with you long after you've put the controller down. Metro Exodus. If you're a fan of immersive, atmospheric games, then Metro Exodus is an experience you absolutely shouldn't miss. This game takes you on a journey through post-apocalyptic Russia, where survival isn't just about fighting enemies, it's about navigating a world that feels as hostile and unforgiving as the creatures lurking in the shadows. You step into the boots of Artyom once again, but this time you're not just confined to the dark tunnels of the metro. Instead, you're traveling across vast, open environments in search of a new home. One of the coolest things about Metro Exodus is how it balances open world exploration with the series' trademark intensity. Each location feels like a character in itself, whether you're creeping through an abandoned village at night, picking your way through a radioactive wasteland, or hiding from a mutant in a dense forest. The atmosphere is thick. You feel constantly on edge, wondering what's around the corner or hiding in the fog. The survival mechanics in this game are spot on too. You're always scavenging for supplies, crafting ammo, and making those crucial decisions about whether to fight or sneak past enemies. It adds a layer of tension that just doesn't let up. And when the bullets start flying, the combat is tight, gritty, and incredibly satisfying. But Metro Exodus doesn't rely on action alone. The story here is surprisingly emotional, especially as you get to know the people traveling with you on the train. These characters feel real with their own struggles and dreams in a world that's fallen apart. You'll actually care about what happens to them. Visually, the game is gorgeous too. The landscapes are bleak but stunning, with dynamic weather and day-night cycles that make the world feel alive, even when it's literally dying. Every bit of detail, from the rusty train to the crumbling buildings, sucks you deeper into its harsh, beautiful world. Metro Exodus is the kind of game that pulls you in with its world building, challenges you with its combat, and hits you in the gut with its story. Trust me, you'll be thinking about this one long after the credits roll. No regrets here, just one hell of a ride. Plague Tale Requiem. Let's talk about a Plague Tale Requiem, a game that's going to put you through an emotional roller coaster and make you care about every second of it. This is the kind of game where the story just hits different. You're back with Amisha and Hugo, and their journey is more intense, more brutal, and somehow even more heartbreaking than before. If you thought the first game was heavy, Requiem cranks that up to 11. What really stands out here is the bond between the siblings. You feel the weight of their struggles, especially as Amisha tries so hard to protect Hugo, but you can see it's wearing her down. The game doesn't shy away from showing how messy, raw, and real that love is. And Hugo? He's dealing with the curse in ways that'll pull at your heartstrings. You'll find yourself rooting for them, hurting with them, and sometimes just sitting there going, man, how much more can they take? Gameplay-wise, it's not just about sneaking around and avoiding swarms of rats though. Yeah, there are still a lot of those. This time Amisha is a lot more capable and the game lets you embrace that. You can be more aggressive, setting traps, using your environment, and honestly just feeling like a badass when you take down enemies. But here's the thing, the game makes you question that violence. There are moments where you wonder, am I really making things better, or am I just adding to the chaos? It's not just a simple stealth action game. There's a moral weight to your decisions that keeps you on edge. And can we talk about how stunning this game looks? From sunlit fields to grim, rat-infested catacombs, every location feels alive or, well, dying. The graphics are top tier, but more importantly, they're used to build an atmosphere that's both beautiful and haunting. It's one of those games where you stop just to take in the view, even when you know danger is lurking somewhere nearby.
The rats. They attacked.
But what'll really stick with you is the emotional punch. A Plague Tale Requiem is dark, it's heavy, and it's not afraid to break your heart a few times along the way. It's one of those rare games where the story, the characters, and the gameplay all come together in a way that leaves a lasting impact. If you're into story-driven games that aren't afraid to get a little bleak but reward you with some unforgettable moments, this is a game you need to play. You'll feel every second of it, and you won't regret diving into this world, even if it crushes you a little bit.
Our joy, and the unity of the bond we all...
Mad Max. Mad Max is one of those games that kind of flies under the radar, but if you give it a shot, it'll surprise the hell out of you. This is the perfect example of a game that's better than you expect, especially if you're into post-apocalyptic worlds that feel gritty, dangerous, and strangely beautiful in their own desolate way. You step into the shoes of Max, and the game does a fantastic job of making you feel like a lone wanderer in a wasteland where survival isn't just about beating enemies, it's about scraping by in a world that's basically given up on everything. Let's talk about the car combat first, because honestly, that's where this game shines. Driving around in your tricked out Magnum Opus, slamming enemies off the road, or harpooning parts off their cars never gets old. The game is all about upgrading your ride, and trust me, you're gonna get hooked on making that thing as deadly as possible. The open world is huge, and the freedom to roam, scavenge for parts, and take down convoys or warlords is a blast. It's a wasteland, but man, they made it fun to drive through. The hand-to-hand combat is more straightforward, but it's got that raw, visceral edge. Think of the Batman Arkham series, but more brutal and savage, which fits perfectly with the whole Mad Max vibe. Every punch, every counter feels like it hits harder, because Max isn't just fighting for glory, he's fighting to survive. And you feel that desperation in every brawl. The world itself is stunning in its own weird way. You've got endless dunes, wreckage from a civilization long gone, and those massive dust storms that can roll in and just wreck everything, including you if you're not careful. There's something about being alone in this vast, broken world that's both peaceful and unnerving, and the game captures that beautifully. Mad Max doesn't get enough credit for how solid it is. Sure, it might not have the deepest story, but it nails the atmosphere and gameplay. If you're into open world games where you can lose yourself for hours, upgrading your car, exploring ruins, and getting into brutal fights, this game is so worth picking up. You won't regret jumping into Max's shoes and carving out your own path through the apocalypse. Dead Space Remake. Man, if you're a fan of horror games, you need to play the Dead Space Remake. It's not just a re-release with a shiny coat of paint. This is a full-on remake that cranks up the tension, atmosphere, and terror to new heights. The original Dead Space was already a masterpiece of sci-fi horror, but the remake takes everything that made it great and dials it up to a level where you'll feel like your heart's about to explode at any given moment. You're still Isaac Clarke, an engineer thrown into a nightmare aboard the USG Ishimura, a mining ship overrun by grotesque alien creatures called necromorphs. From the moment you step on board, the game doesn't let up. The atmosphere is thick with dread, whether it's the flickering lights, the eerie sounds echoing down the hallways, or the horrifyingly detailed corpses scattered everywhere. It constantly keeps you on edge. You'll hear something scuttling in the vents, and it'll make you pause, wondering if you really want to go down that corridor. Spoiler alert, you don't, but you will anyway.
It died. We shot that fucker right between the eyes.
The visuals are absolutely insane. The Ishimura feels more oppressive and terrifying than ever, with shadows that seem to move in environments that are dripping with a sense of dread. It's not just prettier though. The game's design tweaks and improvements make it feel more seamless, more polished, and more immersive. Isaac is no longer silent, he has voice lines now, which adds so much more to the story and makes him feel like a real person instead of just a space mechanic with a plasma cutter.
Maybe a broken encoder. Daniels and I can handle it in 48 hours, max.
Speaking of that, plasma cutter combat is just as brutal, if not more. Dismembering necromorphs never felt so satisfying or so necessary. The game forces you to think on your feet, figuring out how to take down enemies that are relentless and can come at you from literally anywhere. You're always low on ammo, always scrambling for health, and it keeps the tension at a breaking point the entire time. But what really stands out about the Dead Space remake is how it honors the original while adding enough new content to keep even longtime fans on their toes. There are changes to the story, new areas to explore, and the entire experience feels more cohesive. It's like they took what was already an incredible horror game and just perfected it in every way possible. If you love horror, sci-fi, or just games that make you sweat through your controller, Dead Space Remake is worth every penny. It's terrifying in the best way possible, and you won't regret jumping back into the nightmare. Just be ready to sleep with the lights on after. Days Gone. Days Gone is one of those games that got a mixed reception at launch, but let me tell you, it's seriously worth your time, especially if you love open world action with a side of emotional storytelling. You step into the boots of Deacon St. John, a drifter and former outlaw trying to survive in a post-apocalyptic world overrun by freakers, essentially a much more terrifying version of zombies. But here's the thing, Days Gone is more than just another zombie game. It's got heart. The story kicks off as Deacon is struggling to find a purpose in a world that's falling apart, and you quickly realize the game is as much about his personal journey as it is about fighting off hordes of freakers. Deacon's relationship with his best friend Boozer and his memories of his wife Sarah are what drive him forward, and it's that emotional core that keeps you invested. Yeah, you'll be blasting through waves of monsters, but the moments when the game slows down and lets you breathe are where it shines the most. Speaking of freakers, let's talk about those hordes. If you think you've seen intense battles in other games, wait until you're sprinting through an abandoned lumber mill with hundreds of freakers hot on your tail. The first time you take on a horde is a moment you won't forget. It's chaotic, terrifying, and it forces you to think on your feet. You'll be setting traps, laying down Molotovs, and scrambling for high ground, all while hoping you don't run out of ammo. It's honestly some of the most intense gameplay I've experienced in an open world game. And then there's the bike. Deacon's motorcycle isn't just for getting around, it's basically a character in itself. You're constantly upgrading it, taking care of it, and managing fuel, which adds a layer of survival that feels authentic to this world. Running out of gas in the middle of nowhere while being hunted by freakers? Not fun, but it adds to that feeling of always being on edge. The game makes you care about your bike because without it, you're screwed. The Oregon wilderness setting is another thing that makes Days Gone stand out. It's not just the typical post-apocalyptic wasteland. The world is beautiful in a rugged, dangerous way. You'll go from dense forests to snow-covered mountains, all while dealing with dynamic weather and a day-night cycle that actually affects gameplay. Freakers are more aggressive at night, so you'll have to plan when and where you travel, which adds a nice layer of strategy. Sure, it's not a perfect game. Some parts feel a little stretched out, and there are occasional bugs, but when you look at the full package, solid combat, an emotional story, insane horde mechanics, and that open world freedom, it's a game that deserves more love than it got at launch. If you missed it the first time around, don't sleep on Days Gone. You won't regret giving it a second chance. Metal Gear Solid 4. Alright, if you're a fan of stealth, epic storytelling, and action with some serious heart, Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots is an absolute must-play. This game wraps up one of the most iconic and complex storylines in gaming history, and while it's definitely for those who are invested in the Metal Gear saga, the payoff here is monumental. You play as an older, worn-down Solid Snake, now known as Old Snake, who's on his final mission to take down his nemesis, Liquid Ocelot. This game hits you with a mix of nostalgia and emotional weight right from the start. You've seen Snake go through hell in previous games, but now, the dude is literally falling apart. He's aging rapidly, and it adds a layer of vulnerability that we haven't seen from him before. It's like watching a legend in his final hours, and it's both tragic and beautiful. The stealth gameplay is as tight as ever, but with the addition of a few new mechanics like the Octocomo suit that lets you blend into your surroundings, it makes sneaking around feel more dynamic and rewarding. And let's not forget the combat, it's more refined, and when things go sideways, you have plenty of options to blast your way out. The game gives you a ton of freedom in how you approach each mission, whether you want to be a ghost or a one-man army. What sets MGS4 apart is the insane attention to detail and storytelling that Hideo Kojima is known for. The game's cutscenes are long, really long, but they're also some of the most cinematic and emotionally charged moments you'll ever see in a game. There's an operatic feel to it all, and Kojima doesn't hold back on tying up all those complicated plot threads from past games. It's a massive love letter to fans, filled with callbacks and moments that'll hit you right in the feels. There are some scenes that are just straight up gut punches, especially if you've followed Snake's journey since the beginning. Visually, for a PS3 game, MGS4 was mind-blowing when it came out, and it still holds up today. The environments, the character models, the action sequences, everything is polished to a high level. The atmosphere shifts from war-torn battlefields to more intimate, personal moments, and it keeps you hooked the whole time.
They've implemented a system that monitors.
And then there's the boss fights classic Metal Gear. With that signature mix of strategy and pure adrenaline, each one feels like a puzzle, and taking down these larger-than-life enemies is just as satisfying as ever. If you haven't played Metal Gear Solid 4 yet, and you're even remotely interested in stealth action games with deep stories, you need to make time for this. It's the kind of game that leaves a lasting impression, and you won't regret experiencing Snake's final epic chapter. Uncharted 4. If there's one game that truly feels like the ultimate send-off for a beloved character, it's Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. Nathan Drake's final adventure is an absolute masterpiece that blends jaw-dropping visuals, heart-pounding action, and an emotional story that hits you right in the feels. It's one of those games that once you start, you can't put down because it just keeps delivering one epic moment after another. At its core, Uncharted 4 is a story about family, and it dives deep into Nate's relationships, especially with his long-lost brother Sam. The dynamic between the two adds a layer of complexity to the game that the previous entries didn't really touch on. This isn't just about treasure hunting anymore. It's about coming to terms with the past, dealing with the consequences of choices, and figuring out what's more important, fortune or family. You feel that inner struggle with Nate, and by the end, it's hard not to get a little emotional. But let's be real, you're also here for the action, and Uncharted 4 delivers big time. The set pieces are insane, from a high-speed chase through the streets of Madagascar to a heart-stopping escape as everything crumbles around you. Every action scene feels like you're playing through a Hollywood blockbuster with just the right amount of over-the-top craziness that somehow feels grounded because it's Nate. Whether you're scaling cliffs, fighting off mercenaries, or solving ancient puzzles, the game keeps you constantly engaged. The gameplay is refined to perfection. The shooting mechanics feel tighter, and the addition of the grappling hook adds a whole new dimension to exploration and combat. The game gives you a bit more freedom in how you approach situations, whether you want to go in guns blazing or stealth your way through enemy camps. It's a nice change of pace from the more linear approach of previous games. Visually, Uncharted 4 is still one of the best looking games out there. The level of detail in the environments is insane, from lush jungles to crumbling ruins. And don't even get me started on the character animations, every little facial expression, every movement feels so real that you sometimes forget you're playing a game. What makes Uncharted 4 stand out though is its balance. It's got action, sure, but it's also full of quiet, emotional moments that hit just as hard. Whether it's a flashback to Nate's childhood or a conversation between him and Elena that feels way too real, the game knows when to dial things back and let you catch your breath.
At least, let me try to earn some or something.
By the time the credits roll, you feel like you've been on a real journey with Nate 1 filled with excitement, danger, and a lot of heart. If you haven't played Uncharted 4 yet, it's time. It's more than just a great action game, it's a fitting and emotional end to one of gaming's most iconic characters. You won't regret it. Sekiro. Let me tell you right off the bat, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice doesn't mess around. This game will kick your ass, but in the best possible way. If you're looking for something that's intense, challenging, and damn near rewarding when you finally get the hang of it, Sekiro is your game. Forget about button mashing through enemies. This game forces you to get good. And when you do, it's one hell of a ride. You play as the Wolf, a shinobi on a mission to protect his lord and get revenge on anyone who stands in his way. The story's simple but deep, and it's full of that classic From Software cryptic storytelling. You've got samurai, ninjas, mythical creatures, it's wild, and the whole thing is set in a beautifully brutal version of feudal Japan. The world feels dangerous, but also weirdly beautiful, like you're exploring this ancient, mystical land where everything could kill you at any moment. And honestly, it probably will. The combat, though, man, it's on a whole other level. If you're used to games like Dark Souls or Bloodborne, Sekiro is a different beast. It's all about timing, precision, and mastering the swordplay. You're not just blocking or dodging, you're deflecting, and when you nail that perfect deflect, it's like, hell yeah, I'm a damn ninja, but trust me, it's tough. The bosses are brutal and will push you to your limit, but the feeling you get when you finally take them down is so worth it. You'll be pumping your fist in the air after every victory. And let's talk about the stealth. Yes, you can sneak around like a true shinobi, picking off enemies one by one. It adds a whole new layer to the gameplay, and sometimes it's nice to get the jump on a bad guy instead of facing them head on. But when the game decides it's time for a boss fight, strap in because it's going to be a crazy ride. One of the coolest mechanics is the resurrection ability. You can come back to life right after dying, which sounds overpowered, but it's really not. It just gives you a second chance to learn from your mistakes and adapt to the brutal combat. And trust me, you'll be dying a lot. This game doesn't hold your hand, but that's part of the fun. Sekiro isn't just a game, it's an experience. It's tough as hell, but if you're into games that make you earn every victory, this is going to be your jam. It's fast, it's unforgiving, and it's crazy satisfying when you finally figure it out. Just be prepared to swear at your screen a few times. You'll need some serious patience, but damn when you master it. It's one of the best feelings in gaming. No regrets here, just a lot of tough love. Ghost of Tsushima. If you haven't played Ghost of Tsushima yet, you're seriously missing out. This game is one of those rare gems that hooks you right from the start and doesn't let go. During the Mongol invasion of Japan, you play as Jin Sakai, a samurai who's forced to break away from tradition to protect his homeland. The story is intense and personal. It's about honor, sacrifice, and figuring out what kind of warrior you're going to be in a world that's falling apart. Let's talk about the world though, damn, it's stunning. Tsushima Island is probably one of the most beautiful open worlds I've ever seen in a game. Every time you hop on your horse and ride through fields of tall grass, cherry blossoms falling around you, or watch a sunset over the cliffs, you can't help but stop and take it all in. It's crazy how much detail they packed into this world. You'll find yourself just wandering around, discovering hidden shrines, bamboo forests, and hot springs, and it all feels so alive. Combat in Ghost of Tsushima is straight up badass. Whether you want to play like a traditional samurai challenging enemies to standoffs and taking them down with precise strikes, or sneak around like a ghost, slicing through enemies before they even know you're there, the game lets you choose your style. The swordplay is tight, responsive, and just feels good, and when you land that perfect parry or slice through a wave of Mongols in a standoff, you feel like an absolute legend. The story also hits hard. Jin's internal struggle between sticking to the honorable samurai code and adopting more dishonorable tactics as a ghost is what really drives the narrative. You'll feel his pain and conflict as he wrestles with doing what's necessary to save his people, even if it means betraying everything he's been taught. It's a deep emotional journey, and the game nails those quiet, personal moments just as much as the big action scenes. And I've got to mention the Legends multiplayer mode too. It's a co-op experience that adds a supernatural twist to the game's world, and it's honestly way more fun than I expected. Whether you're teaming up with friends to take on waves of enemies or going for a raid, it's a blast and gives the game some serious replayability. Ghost of Tsushima is more than just a pretty open world game. It's a love letter to samurai cinema, it's packed with emotional depth, and it's got some of the smoothest, most satisfying combat around. If you're looking for a game that's going to keep you hooked for hours, this one's a no-brainer. You won't regret taking up the sword as Jin Sakai. Death Stranding. Alright, Death Stranding is one of those games that's definitely not for everyone, but if you're looking for something truly unique, this one will blow your mind. You play as Sam Porter Bridges, a delivery guy in a post-apocalyptic world where humanity is on the brink of extinction, and yeah, I know that sounds weird, but stick with me, this game is a wild ride in the best possible way. First off, let's just acknowledge how crazy this game is. It's a Hideo Kojima game after all, so you already know you're in for something out there. The world is a hauntingly beautiful wasteland with massive landscapes that make you feel tiny. You spend a lot of time delivering packages, and while that might sound boring on paper, the game makes it an adventure. You're not just walking from point A to point B, you're managing your gear, avoiding terrifying supernatural creatures called BTs, and dealing with unpredictable weather that can destroy your cargo. It's a lot of planning and strategizing, and when you complete a tough delivery, it's weirdly satisfying. But Death Stranding is more than just a game about walking though. Yeah, there's a lot of that. It's about connection. The game's online system lets you interact with other players in subtle ways, like leaving behind ladders or bridges that others can use. You might never meet another player, but the world feels alive because of these small acts of kindness. It's strangely emotional, like you're not alone in this desolate world, even though you kinda are. And the story? Oh man, it's pure Kojima. It's weird, it's deep, and at times it's a little hard to follow, but it all comes together in a way that sticks with you. You've got this star-studded cast, with Norman Reedus as Sam, Mads Mikkelsen, and even Guillermo del Toro making an appearance. The cutscenes are long, cinematic, and honestly, you'll either love them or be totally confused, but in a good way. It's got a lot of heart, and by the end, the game really makes you think about the idea of rebuilding and connecting with others.
Come on, we got morphine there. What's this about? Tell me the truth.
Gameplay-wise, it's not your typical action-packed experience. There are some tense moments, especially when you're dealing with BTs or mules, basically package-stealing bandits, but the focus is more on exploration and managing your deliveries. You'll need patience for this one, but if you give it a chance, it's one hell of a journey. If you're looking for something different, something that breaks the mold of what we usually expect from games, Death Stranding is worth your time. It's weird, it's slow at times, but damn, it's an experience you won't forget. You'll either love it or be totally baffled, but you definitely won't regret giving it a try. Gears of War 5.
For like 25 years.
Yeah, that's pretty evident.
Gears 5 did get some flack when it came out, and it's definitely worth talking about. For all the praise it got for pushing the story forward and tweaking the gameplay, some fans weren't totally on board with every change. One of the biggest complaints was about the open world sections. Yeah, they tried something new, giving players more freedom to explore, but for some people it felt like it slowed the pacing down a bit too much.
Feels weightless, but it's not. You gotta learn not to overcorrect.
Gears has always been about intense, in-your-face action, and some folks felt like those slower, exploration-heavy segments took away from that classic non-stop momentum. Another issue was the story focus on Kate. While a lot of people loved getting a more emotional and character-driven narrative, there were some who weren't vibing with the shift away from Marcus Fenix and the traditional Gears crew. They felt like it was a bit of a gamble that didn't pay off for them, especially if they were used to the more straightforward, bro-centric feel of the earlier games.
So what's your issue with Jack anyway?
And yeah, I know it had some multiplayer issue too, but I never play online or multiplayer games, so I won't discuss, but the game is still pretty good. You follow Kate Diaz, and the game dives deeper into her personal story, which is a bit of a change from the usual muscle-bound heroes the series is known for. Kate's journey to uncover her past and figure out her connection to the Locust Horde gives the game a real sense of purpose. It's not just about fighting off waves of enemies anymore, there's an emotional core that keeps you invested, and the way the game handles themes of loss, family, and identity, it's damn good, especially for a series that's known more for its over-the-top action.
And now we need to kill it.
Speaking of action, don't worry, Gears 5 still delivers all the explosive combat you expect. The cover-based shooting is as tight as ever, and the game gives you more freedom than before with its semi-open world sections. These open areas let you explore, take on side missions, and soak in the beautiful yet dangerous environments. It's a nice break from the more linear levels, and it makes the world feel bigger and more alive. And let's not forget about Jack, your little robot buddy. He adds a whole new layer to combat by letting you use his abilities for things like stunning enemies or making you invisible for a sneaky takedown. It's a small addition, but it opens up new strategies and makes the fights feel more dynamic. Visually, Gears 5 is a stunner. The environments are diverse, from frozen wastelands to desert landscapes, and everything looks crisp and detailed. Whether you're playing on PC or Xbox, the game runs beautifully and really shows off what the hardware can do. Alright everyone, that was the all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel and I will see you later. Have a good day.